Welcome to this too. My name is Timothy and I'm your host. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's going to be a slight deviation from the usual topics that I cover. Before I get into that, let me just go into my usual disclaimer first. I'm not a medical health practitioner. I'm not licensed in any way, shape, or form to provide any kind of diagnosis. I'm purely a man who has been dealing with his own diagnosis of borderline personality, major depressive disorder and anxiety, and just trying to navigate the landscape and rebuild my life after some really tragic events and major depressive episodes that led me to attempt to take my own life last year. So I want to thank you for joining me, and I'm hoping that this is a safe space where we can talk about things that we should be as men. That's my goal, so that I can hopefully provide a platform and in some way, shape, or form help. So thank you so much for joining me, and let's dive into today's topic. What I want to talk about today is the Louis Theroux documentary, The Manosphere. I watched it over the weekend and talk about a few things. Obviously, what they talk about is, in a nutshell, it's masculinity, right? But the way it's being done, the way it's being promoted, and how it's being monetized as well. So yeah, there were so many things that were unsettling for me. It's unsettling in terms of the documentary because everything in that space and everything that they discuss is so wrong, and it's so skewed in terms of its perspective. It's not based on fact. It's purely misogynistic opinions and racism and fascism, all just lumped into one. And it's done in a way to kind of make men look like victims. And I think weak men fall for that because a lot of weak men have not done the work on themselves. And so instead of being able to look at your situation realistically and say, you know what, I haven't done things the way I should have, I've responded in ways that have not been becoming. Instead of doing that and taking accountability, what we do is we want to play victim, and we want to blame someone else for the problems that we are experiencing. And this is something that manipulative people have done since the beginning of time. We focus on someone else and blame them for the problem. You know, you don't need to look too far back into our history. A perfect example of that would be Hitler and the Nazi propaganda machine, blaming Jews for the difficulties that Germans faced post First World War. And we all know how that ended. And oddly enough, some people are actually disputing the Holocaust and saying it was a hoax. And some of these people are found within the Manosphere. You know, Trump also features as someone that is highly regarded within the Manosphere, and that alone is troubling because we know he is misogynistic, sexist, racist, fascist, and ignorant. We know that he is a hypocrite when it comes to the values and the things that he claims to stand for. And we know that the entire MAGA movement itself is fraught with this hypocrisy, and MAGA is also an example of what is overrunning the madness. If you're a man, you know, you might feel isolated, you might feel lost in the world where things have moved so fast and we haven't perhaps been able to keep pace with the changes. That is not anyone else's problem except our own. We need to adapt to the world as it is. We've expected women to live in our shadow. We've expected women for so long to be our subordinate. But we know that that's not the way things are supposed to be, and we know that things have changed. And now women are actually moving ahead of men in a lot of respects because they are focused on ability and not a sense of entitlement. So many women are going out there and earning and working for the things. And that obviously applies to men as well. But when you see a high-powered woman in an executive position, you don't think that she's worked hard and she's spent many nights. No, the assumption is, she's a gender equality hire, or she slept away to the top. That's how things get manipulated and used. So, you know, I think a lot of it is down to insecurity and a lot of inability to accept that things have changed. Obviously, you know, they're stuck in an archaic view of viewing the world that women are there for sexual gratification, making babies, serving my needs. That's what you are there for. And that's prevalent if you watch the documentary. And how women are spoken to and how women are treated and viewed in the documentary is really, really scary and shocking as a father to a daughter. You know, the world that she's going to be going into that is so reliant on social media and so influenced by social media and these platforms that give these people platform to spew this bile. And the worst and the saddest thing about it is that they talk about not being a follower, about being an alpha male, but what they want you to do is follow them. So it's entirely hypocritical, and it's entirely based around monetizing other people's insecurities and fears and pains and struggles for them to benefit from. So if you agree with me, let's dive deeper and let's talk about this and let's have a discussion about it. I hope that people leave comments. I hope that you guys go ahead and watch it. But let's talk about what the Manosphere is first and foremost, just with a little bit more depth, just so that we can all understand and grasp what it is. So it's not one single group. It's basically a collective. It's a network of online communities that focus on masculinity, relationships, and the belief that modern society is working against men. And you hear a lot of catchphrases that these guys spew out. You know, they are anti-woke. They are, you know, there's a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment that I heard in the show. Now, you know, because they say that the Jews control this, the Jews. First, like, this anti-Semitic view, that's just another form of fascism and ignorance. Blaming another group for something that you perhaps weren't able to achieve, or standing in the way of you doing something. The only person standing in your way is yourself, really. And what they do is they kind of preach these red pill philosophies. So they kind of tell you that you're stuck in the matrix, and that, like Neo, you need to take the red pill to unplug and see the world for what it is. They sell themselves as pickup artists, being able to dominate a woman and to, you know, seduce her. You use these lines, and you're an alpha male, and, you know, you use your power and your money and your influence, these types of things. You know, and I think a lot of people would immediately think of someone like Andrew Tate. Immediately, he comes to mind. You know, and a lot of the men that gravitate towards that or go towards it are probably what you call quote unquote nice guys. Guys who have trauma growing up and believe under the guise of being a quote unquote nice guy, I'll get what I want. But the quote unquote nice guy is often quite resentful and deceitful in terms of how they represent themselves. So they're lacking confidence, they're lacking security, and so they will gravitate to guys who push this fake air of confidence and gravitas and machismo. But it's just a hollow illusion. So, you know, guys who are struggling with purpose or struggling with women, or, you know, body image issues, maybe they're overweight, you know, whatever insecurities, you're not as successful in life as you want to be, but you think you deserve it. These are the types of people and mindsets that they will prey on. And, you know, it's about, they want to take us back to perhaps the more traditional, archaic roles of men and women. And it's become more radicalized over time, and they become more aggressive in the language and more offensive in the language that I'm seeing and the content, you know, just based on what I see. And a lot of it is to capitalize on basically the loneliness economy. There's a lot of men struggling to find connection. There's a lot of people out there struggling to find connection and struggling to find meaningful connection. And as a guy who has come out of an abusive relationship, a long-term abusive relationship, I can understand why people would fall for that. I can understand why you would allow your anger and your bitterness towards women to maybe push you into a direction where you want to vilify and objectify and make them feel as bad as you perhaps felt. Because maybe you were cheated on, maybe you were lied to, maybe you were manipulated or used. And so that's the crutch that you use to motivate you and to drive you on. But those were choices that you made, whether you were naive, whether you did it under manipulation or false pretenses, it doesn't matter. You made those choices and you got to live with it. And that's what I have to live with. And there are times when my anger in terms of the abuse that I was subjected to has come to the surface, and I respond. I behave, and I wouldn't necessarily say I act out, but I find, or I try to find, channels to express my frustration. I know that if I speak to the person that committed these things against me, I'm not going to get the honesty, the truth, the acknowledgement from them that I deserve. But it's not about me getting it from them. It's about me letting them know that I know what has happened, and you're not going to be able to change that story. No matter how much you want to lie or deny, the truth is still the truth, and I know what the truth is. So it's more for me than it is for them. And that's kind of how I deal with some of the anger and the frustration that I have to stomach and accept. Because if you're in a situation that feels unfair, your automatic push is to right it and to get that sense of justice. Life doesn't work like that. I think men also partly are victims of that. We tend to feel like I deserve certain things for the effort that I put in. I'm a good person. I should be getting these things. I'm a good guy. I should have the girl, the job, these things. And when they don't pan out, you want to look for reasons why they don't, and maybe you act angrily. This, like I said, the loneliness economy is something that these guys kind of focus on. And what you'll notice is they come in the guise of a mentor, but what they're actually trying to do is sell a membership. So sign up, pay your monthly subscription. For a fee, I'll give you the tips. I'll guide you. You can be just like me and not have to chase women, not have to be subjected to a woman's whims or desires, whereas they will act on yours. And obviously to an immature guy, that's going to seem awesome because they don't understand relationships and they don't understand women. And because you are insecure, because you have all these holes in you and these traumas in your psyche, you're going to look for superficial things to fill those gaps and to fill your self-esteem, to make you feel better. And that's partly where these guys really, make a killing and get it in. They blame, they always look at low-hanging fruit in terms of who they blame. I was listening to one guy talking about how they needed to stop Kamala Harris from being voted in as the next president because she was a woman. So you'd rather have a racist, fascist, idiotic man like Donald Trump in charge than somebody who was actually going to be able to navigate your country to a better place in the long run that would benefit you, your parents, your children, and generations. You'd rather have that. I mean, Trump has just led the US into another war. He's led oil prices to go up. He's impacting the entire globe. And this is the moron that these guys think is the person that's got the answers. Why? Because he talks tough. He talks like an 80s action star. And that's that, base element that these guys still fall for. They think that if you walk around and act like an action hero from a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, that you can do a roundhouse kick and the world's going to fall at your feet. It does not work like that. There's a huge, huge contradiction there. And, I'm not saying that men are stupid for falling for these tricks, but there's a lot of things in this world that have made a lot of men feel devalued, invisible. There's a lot of factors that impact on you being able to just be a man in this world. I know that the way things have changed in the way we speak, how we speak about women, how we speak about towards our children, everything has changed, and a lot of men are still stuck in a very archaic, very misogynistic way of looking at things. And the issue is not that they are, we take these issues and these problems and the pressures that these men feel and are experiencing, and it's targeted against very simplistic enemies. And that really, for me, creates a huge problem, because what these guys do is they don't respond with debate, they respond in aggression. And aggression in terms of language, aggression in terms of behavior. It's just not, I think, what a man is and how a man should be choosing to resolve issues. This is how a caveman would resolve issues. Cavemen went extinct. So there should be something there. Or maybe they need to think about that. And what they're doing is they are monetizing the insecurity by selling these programs, selling access to a quote-unquote campus where I'll teach you, I'll take you through courses, and you'll be an alpha male, and you'll know how to trade, and you'll be making money. But it's all just to get you to give them money, handing your hard-earned money over to them. Through these communities and the quote-unquote support that they provide you with. And it's just a gift. It's like a Ponzi scheme. And so many guys are not willing to put in the hard work and the hard effort and the patience that is needed to achieve real tangible success, whether that is financial, psychological, emotional. Things don't happen overnight. And, I'm trying to rebuild myself through discipline, through hard work, through reflection and honesty. And I know that people in the manosphere, these podcasters and influencers, would probably look at me and say, say very disparaging and insulting things about me because of what I've been through and how things have affected me. But when you look at them and you see how they operate, and definitely I would advise to watch the documentary and to see how truly insecure and unintelligent they are. Because if they were really able to stand on what they believe in and argue it intellectually, they wouldn't resolve to or resort to profanity, obscene things, and pushing the envelope to trying to be more intense, obscene, sexual, violent, in terms of pushing the envelope to get more clicks. If they were actually based on content and subject matter. That's where I will leave it for now. I'm hoping that we can start a debate. I will go into how we perhaps look at how we can start pushing back. What are the solutions to pushing back in terms of the manosphere, and what I will be looking to do going forward in terms of that, because I feel like it's not enough that we do a Facebook post or an Instagram or whatever and say that these things are wrong. There needs to be a counter movement to show that men are different. And that is something that I'd like to actively look into. So if any guys out there want to make contact, want to speak to me about starting a movement where we can show a different way, where we can talk about growth and healing and fatherhood and masculinity in a more inclusive way, please let me know. I'm really keen to try and create some form of discussion, whether that be in person or electronic. However, any suggestions, any comments, please let me know. I'm really keen to hear what you guys think. I will be doing another podcast on the manosphere. This is just the first part, just to kind of dive into it, and then we'll go into maybe later in the week how we can push back against it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me. I hope that what we've spoken about stimulates some form of discussion. Thank you so much again. My name is Timothy. Just remember, whatever you are dealing with, good or bad, this too shall pass.